Don't you love it when you make a presentation and the person says, great idea? You know, I've learned that in my career at New York City Parks, as a park planner, as a park administrator, and as a design leader, that unlocks the potential of your employees, it unlocks the potential of your interns, your coworkers, and community members. And I have learned that embracing other people's idea and giving them permission to take on some responsibility for some part of the city makes it a better place. I'm going to tell you a story. Imagine a young planner, his first job in New York City, walking through Riverside Park with his clipboard, doing his due diligence, doing the site analysis, looking at what needs to be fixed, what maybe should go there, and thinking, wow, I'm getting to make a plan in New York City. And he rounds the corner, and this is what he sees. People who are not waiting on his plan. And then he walks up to them and says, what's up? They say, well, we've been kicked out of our spot on Broadway, and we're an organized group, and we'd like to have a garden here. And we thought it was a great spot for a garden, and he thought, well, yeah, they're right. It's a great spot for a garden. And so we had some discussions internally in the Parks Department about what should be done, but we agreed that it was a great spot for a garden, but that we can't allow them to privatize, to make it private. And that's a legitimate concern, so we thought, all right, have a waiting list. So that when there are spaces, it's open to the public and other people can join. And you know what? That was a terrific decision, because we would never have designed a garden this beautiful. And you know, one of the things that made it so beautiful is that there were 40 gardeners. And every time a child came by, there was someone the child could speak to. And the children said, let's go see Joanne. And it had a personality. And it had many different personalities, because there were so many gardeners, so there was always something special for people to see. And it became a destination. So they had taken a place that was nice enough, but it was just grass, and they'd made it into a magical place, which was a dating destination. And it all warmed our hearts to see that had been recognized as one of the places that epitomized a joyful spot in this park. And we really needed that, because when we started Riverside Park, it had 30 years of neglect. And most urban parks had 30 years of neglect. And we learned that the best thing for us to do as we were proceeding with our master plan was to work with other people. And so when we got a little bit of money and we had our gardening crew work, we worked with the neighbors. And bit by bit, we made friends and we made advocates. And we learned that if we let people adopt sections of the park, actually take responsibility for part of that landscape, that it was magic. Because, as you would imagine, if you had a garden, you would look at it daily, and you would note the intimate changes and what was doing well and what's not. And that's what happened for these people in a public park. We had a rule, no fences. It has to look like it's part of the nature, but that changed them. And that they told me, they said, you know, I'm part of something bigger. I feel like I'm really making a difference. And they did. That ethic, making a difference and pitching in on something larger, really came home to me when we, as part of our plan, said that we would convert the clay tennis courts in Riverside Park to asphalt so they'd be easier to maintain, because they were in terrible condition. And the people who loved the clay said, oh no, don't do that. We'll take care of them. This is a public facility. The public wants to take care of it. Well, we decided, our other golden rule is, okay, let's try it. And so we said we'd try it, and we'll buy the materials. And you know, they exceeded everyone's expectations. They got everybody who played tennis to help prepare the courts in the spring. They organized the competitions. They organized fundraisers. They organized, in fact, they said, we'd like to take care of everything around the tennis courts. We'll mow the yard. We'll plant the flowers. Can you imagine how we felt when the Wall Street Journal said, these courts are the gold standard of clay tennis courts? There's one Parks employee here, but they are the gold standard. How could that be? We learned that when people are motivated to do something, they are determined. David Goldstick, one of my favorite people, was a retired real estate lawyer, avid gardener and propagator, and he had filled his weekend home with plants. I mean, the whole yard's full. And he propagated his own plants, so his neighbors' yards were full. And the traffic island near his house was full. And he said, I want to help in Riverside Park, and he brought his sorcerer's apprentice propagation techniques to Riverside Park, and we let him do a lot. And it was evident. And he said, you know, my birthday's coming up. I'd like my family to be able to raise money to help the park. And they and his colleagues raised money to restore the Warsaw Ghetto Memorial Plaza. They raised $60,000. We put that with some money that we had at the Parks Department, and our landscape architect did the design, and this was a forlorn spot, and it was now a sanctified place for people to remember the massacre that occurred at the Warsaw Ghetto in Poland. And all of this came from a person who thought he would make a difference. Jenny wanted a vegetable garden. Vegetable gardens are hard to locate in a landmark park. That's the site. It was a spot filled with stripped cars and drugs, dealers, users, nastiness. We cleaned it up. Jenny has this, you probably know people like Jenny she can get her way. She's charismatic. She talks to drug dealers. She can talk to the contractors. The contractor built her fence, and she got anything she wanted from me. And then, picture the little children running down the sidewalk from a neighborhood which is not so nice, crying her name, Jenny, 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 and she greets them with a hug, and you just melt. And now she's greeting the children of those children. You know what's at work here? What's at work is that people are motivated by their own ideas. I would not be successful if I had set out to recruit someone to have a vegetable garden or to restore that plaza. But somebody wanted it. And we have learned that whenever we tackle a project, that we want to know, what are your concerns, what are your wishes, and what are you already working on? And we find ways to incorporate people's passions in our plans. And when we make large plans, we've learned to leave holes in them. And if anybody here is a planner, I am asking you, I'm suggesting that it will benefit if you leave spots for other people's ideas. They don't always fit immediately, but you will get them in that spot. And that adds richness to your plan, to leave room for other people. Now, whenever you open the door to other people's ideas, it gets complicated. So here's the little formula. First of all, you want to give permission. And if it's not quite right, you want to shape it. And then if there are some things that you're concerned about and some limits, you have to make it explicit. They have to know what their authority is, what they can and cannot do, but then you let them organize them themselves, and you let them get their own resources so that they feel like they are responsible for it. And then they'll say, I got a problem, and you can say, okay, what is it? And you can use me as your wild card. And occasionally, and I have to say this, you're going to find some people who are not very helpful. And so it's your job to take care of those people. Either you have to tune them up or you have to tune them out, tune them away. What's the benefit is that it's in Riverside Park. After my involvement ended, we had 80 adopted sites. That's places where even I take care of part of the landscape or a facility, and that's a picture of David's landscape. And you have to admit, it's breathtaking. And it wasn't always that way. And this can apply also to large landscapes like the Bronx River, where citizens take responsibility for ecosystems. And it takes a long time, but the thing is that they lobby effectively and they are intimately aware of what needs to happen. And then, vitality. This is a stroller queue for that hippo playground for their spring fair. This is organized by parents. And they will raise enough money at the spring fair to pay for a year's worth of programs and projects. And they have turned this into kind of an anonymous playground to a place which is a community center. And do not underestimate the power of teenagers. When you give them dominion over an area, which is what they crave, someplace where they're not being, no one's looking over their shoulder. But we built a skate park with teenagers. They designed it, and they built it, and they ran it for several years. And then the other day on the subway, Mr. McKinney, do you remember me from the skate park? I want you to meet my daughter. She's a skater. We had neighbors call to the Riverside Park Conservancy, my Parks Department partner, and said, we'd like to build a monument to Ralph Ellison, the author of Invisible Man. And the Riverside Park Conservancy helped them raise the money, hired Elizabeth Catlett to do the sculpture, and his wife Fanny lived to see the memorial unveiled, and Ralph was no longer invisible. So the thing is that you have to make yourself available to other people's ideas. Take their call. Talk to them at the cocktail party. Figure out if it has currency. And I believe that if you can do that, if you can find ways to make other people's aspirations come true, you're going to make a vibrant community. So, what's the watchword? And together now, great idea.